lives on their head. And before the war, it had been very respectable conservative society. The Second World War changed Australian society immensely. By the time I was a teenager in the 1950s, the police commissioner, Colin Delaney, said the two greatest threats facing Australia are communism and homosexuality.
I was 10 and I had a very close friendship with someone I went to primary school with, and we used to, you be the boy, I'll be the girl, we used to play with that. We were discovered in primary school though and were separated, and I do remember the absolute embarrassment and the sense that there was something wrong.
I was in a religious institution when I was young. I was going to be a priest. One evening I remember, I think we must have had a serious talk about it. So a priest said, oh, you know, you might have feelings for each other, and these are called special relationships in the Catholic Church, and they're a no-no basically.
I went through a heterosexual phase in my late teens and early 20s, but I always knew that I wanted something different, and so gradually you came to terms with where gay life was existing then. In the 60s, there were places you could go to. King's Cross was initially. King's Cross had always been Bohemia in Sydney. The Rex at the Cross, the beer garden there, it had a bar at the back called the Bottoms Up Bar, nice name for a gay bar. So that set the scene for the 1970s.
A lot of people say that, you know, that in fact, to many people's minds, the word homosexual brings up public toilets and little boys being molested.
I think that the whole term homosexual needs redefining. You know, all the perversions of society are lumped on the homosexual at the moment.
I don't think that my homosexuality does anything more to me to make me a sinner because I'm lustful.
For us to walk hand in hand through the city, when we say goodbye when we go to work on the street, it'd be fairly difficult to give each other a goodbye kiss. There is the possibility of being arrested.
In 1972, ABC's Checkerboard was the first program to positively portray gay and lesbian relationships on national television.
And what attracted you to Peter in the beginning?
I don't know, it just went bang.
Instinctively, we felt that it was important to be out, and to be out in a very, very public way.
And what about you, Bonsall? What sort of work do you do?
I'm a secretary in a church.
Now we understand that there was a lot of pressure on the local rector. If he knew about us as a couple, he was very supportive. But we had some feedback that 4 Anglican bishops put so much pressure on this man that they asked Bon, you know, you must leave. And Bon eventually said, no, I'm not, I haven't done anything wrong. So eventually they sacked him.
After the Checkerboard program was broadcast, Peter and Bon received calls from gays and lesbians all over Australia. This gave them the impetus to establish Dial a Friend, the first gay and lesbian phone counselling service conceived with friends from Camp Inc.
What is that you type in?
Just another letter to a member of CAMP.
Which stands for?
Campaign Against Moral Persecution.
It was a clever acronym, CAMP, Campaign Against Moral Persecution, because camp, the word had previously, it was predated gay. And so it was set up in 1970. It had a very clear focus, mainly education, attacking psychiatrists who are doing aversion therapy and counselling.
I was horrified by all the stories I did hear, you know, about shock therapy and aversion therapy. They had been sent by a doctor to a place where they got electric shocks. Male images were shown to them and they were shocked, and then female images were shown and they were not shocked. Certainly that was one of my motivations for getting quite active about calling for law reform and joining in organisations about gay rights.
9 years earlier, the Stonewall riots in New York's Greenwich Village had fuelled the fire that became the gay liberation movement. Australia was primed to be part of a global crusade.
2, 4, 6, 8. Gay is just as good as straight. 2, 4.
The day began, I think we're at Town Hall, we had a march and walking down the street shouting the usual slogans. You know, it was a very mixed, group of people, gay, women, Indigenous people, a whole range of people who were protesting about so many things in those days.
Stop police attacks on gay, women and blacks.
It was a lovely, crisp, sunny morning. I had my camera. We had a wonderful march. We had a combi van at the front. We walked down George Street, got to Martin Place where we had a few speeches. The atmosphere was really strong, really happy, really vibrant, positive, political. It was a good mix of people, a good mix of men and women, various ages.
The day was going to end with a street party, including a parade from Taylor Square down to Hyde Park.
Someone said, we should walk down Oxford Street calling people come out of the bars. So we walked down Oxford Street calling out of the bars and into the streets.
Sing if you're glad to be gay. Sing if you're happy that way.
We had one truck and we were near Taylor Square. My job on the back of that truck was to make sure that the cassette tape kept playing. We had 2 songs in rotation. We imagined that then everybody would just go off in their own way and do parties wherever they wanted to, and it would be a great night.
I got out of the car, I walked up to the corner of College and Liverpool, and then the cops stopped the sound truck, they grabbed the driver.
She was a big, tough woman.
When the police tried to go for Lance, to get him out of the truck and arrest him, lesbians, as they want to do, all jumped in to defend him, and he got away. When the crowd realised that they were being stopped, the feeling was, well, we're not ready to stop. So the cry came out to the cross.
I stopped counting at 30 paddy wagons going into King's Cross across the Darlinghurst Road at the top there.
When we started heading down to El Alamein Fountain, we could see the crowd at the end, and we felt trapped.
And pretty quickly we decided to just disperse. We'd done enough and it was too dangerous for everyone, so let's just turn around, link arms, no chanting, just silently get out of King's Cross. And then the cops just hit the front of that. It was like a little cartoon show. I could see bodies silhouetted against the light flying through the air.
The police were very angry and homophobic and very violent.
I just ran straight into a big policeman and he grabbed me, threw me through the air. My glasses went flying off and I landed in the paddy wagon. I was so annoyed at being arrested and, out of the action straight away.
People walked down from the cross to Darlinghurst Police Station. The police weren't allowing anybody inside. We could hear someone being very brutally assaulted. We didn't know who.
They came back and got me and walked me a long way along a passageway and into a room, and then they just started yelling and bashing me, and so it was very... It's hard to know how long that went on for, but it was a lot of bashing, and in the end I was sort of having convulsions. I thought I would be killed there.
Let them go! Let them go! Let them go!
What we tried to do was to chant and sing, to let the people inside know that we were there, and to gather together as much money as we could because we knew that there was going to be a need for bail. It was a riot, and it was the aftermath of a riot. The core feeling was, we have been mistreated here. We have been utterly disrespected and violently treated.
It was a very big trauma for everyone. But everyone found a way to resist, to say no to this, to stop putting up with it.
By Sunday morning, it was clear that 53 people had been arrested. Outside court the next day, police were out in force.
People were wanting to go inside to support those who were appearing, to give them some sense that there were friends in the courtroom.
In the melee, police barred the public and witnesses from the court. Even solicitors attempting to enter to make pleas for their clients were refused entry.
And again, the acknowledgement of our rights wasn't existing.
After more arrests outside the court, everyone arrested had their names published by the Sydney Morning Herald.
If you are a heterosexual person and you've committed a drunken offence or whatever, if you take yourself back to the 70s, it's not going to have the same impact on your life and your job as being a lesbian woman who's been arrested in a demonstration in the Cross.
For gay people, it gave us an enormous amount of publicity, and enormous numbers of people felt quite sympathetic. The Council of Civil Liberties and a whole range of people who believed in the upholding of the law took the police on. This can't happen. This shouldn't be happening.
And it seems to me very odd indeed that in a state which has an allegedly progressive Labor Premier, homosexuality still remains a major crime.
It wasn't till 1980 when I, threw open that closet door, literally walked straight into the door of camp in Glebe. People were still really angry about what had happened during the Mardi Gras.
We don't want to be molested, we don't want to be contested, we don't want to be arrested, we just want our rights.
I came in exactly at the time when the push for male decriminalisation was ramping up.
During the 9-hour debate, some 24 speakers took the floor. The homosexual reforms were finally passed, 63 votes to 34.
In 1984, New South Wales finally followed the lead of South Australia, Victoria and the ACT by decriminalising consensual sex between adult males.
I didn't presume that the police would necessarily change all that much. So yes, we were no longer illegal, but I didn't necessarily think my life was going to change all that much.
Albion Street Centre, can I help you?
Sydney's AIDS clinic, the first stop for anyone who's worried. By this time next year, this clinic will be one of the city's busiest. And we're told that everyone who comes here expects to die.
Really, it was just out of the blue. We didn't know where it came from. It only appeared at that stage to affect gay men, and it was a death sentence. I mean, people, I knew many of my friends, suddenly they'd look skinny, suddenly they'd look ill, and they start to die. In the gay papers, the death notices start to appear, whole pages of death notices. And it was actually known at the time as GRID, gay-related immune deficiency.
We were connected, obviously, to the US gay media and gay community. We'd been hearing about what was happening. We were getting ready for the discussion about the attack on our sexuality, and we knew it was going to be an attack on our sexuality. It already had been in America, so we were kind of ready for it.
At first, only gays and IV drug users were being killed by AIDS.
Those frightening ads, the Grim Reaper ads, were just ridiculous because they suggested that I could sneeze if I had AIDS and someone would be infected. They encouraged and fueled anger and fear, homophobia. To me, that showed a government that was not acknowledging the extent of a problem that needed to be dealt with in a very compassionate, caring manner.
Section 5 in a gay bar.
You really had a sense that suddenly you were at danger in this society, something which I'd never necessarily felt before.
Suddenly, it felt like we all had to go back into those closets, slam that door and not come out, and hopefully die inside it.
We're homosexuals, we're having a lovely time today.
We weren't going to do that. We'd been out too long, we'd got too far.
Because the gays had been very active politically, pushing for law reform, there was already what you might call a very politicised gay community. So it was able to switch, after law reform came in 1984, switch its focus very quickly to doing something about politicising AIDS.
The AIDS Council says
The gay community had been very strong in setting up a range of support groups, which the federal government eventually built on.
Resources is another matter the Federal Minister for Health, Neil Blewett.
Good. We were very lucky. We had two very good health ministers and Neil Blewett at federal level.
I've got to point out it's a screening test which detects antibodies to the disease. It doesn't.
They realised very quickly, because information came over from overseas, that HIV/AIDS affected you irrespective of age, gender, sexuality, whatever. It was going to become a public health issue. It was no longer just a moral issue. From the 70s, lesbian separatism came in and there had been a real divorce. And I can remember some of the T-shirts friends of mine used to wear. A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. That ended with HIV. The lesbian community really rediscovered gay men and became major supports.
And it's partly because, let's face it, the health system at that stage had bulk lesbians and gay men involved on the wards. They were seeing their community decimated.
The problem is at the males. I had lost friends and was losing friends. Women had a fairly important role in all of that, in the sense of being carers, being administrators of various organisations.
St. Vincent's and Sacred Heart were, again, the leading force in positively working with the community in which it was embedded. The sisters had already been working in Darlinghurst for many, many years in other kinds of social activism. It wasn't a big step for them to kind of see what they were doing as an extension then of their pastoral care. The candlelight vigils. I think they started pretty soon after AIDS first came here. And they were incredibly emotional because you walk the reverse way to the Mardi Gras, so you walk down Oxford Street to Hyde Park. You're carrying candles. It's a silent march. And there was this deep sense of us owning that street in a very different way. And I remember when we used to walk past the hospice, how the hospice people used to bring the people, you know, the gay guys who were in there with HIV out on the balconies. They would always stop and raise our candles to them who were still living.
Let us remember Brian Stevenson, Wayne Elliott, Ian Johnson, Martin Whiting, Donnie Smith,
Leon.
We got to Hyde Park, people just sat there and then they started to read out the names of people who had died. And it still chokes you up when you think of friends. A whole generation gone.
In the 1980s and 90s, Mardi Gras played a vital role as a platform for the community to challenge the stigma about HIV/AIDS.
The various groups, Positive Life, ACT UP, they were all in Mardi Gras parade. Mardi Gras then was far more politicised than it is now.
God made male and female, Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve.
I found the Mardi Gras of those years, they were hugely important for the community itself to feel its strength, to cope with this terrible stuff.
This group, there is 900 participants in the remembrance section.
What was great about the response here was key people in governments at that stage saying, we trust this community. We had done our reading. We were getting the safe sex messages out. We ran the first condom campaign. We set up the first caring group. We were willing to touch each other. The shift obviously started happening around the mid-90s when we got the second range of antiretrovirals and we started doing combination therapies and so on. A lot of us remember that the significant shift we all saw was when the death notices stopped being put in the Sydney Star.
In the 1990s, the gay and lesbian rights movement expanded to encompass bisexual, transgender and queer identities.
Because I came of age during the AIDS epidemic and I knew people who died, I was very involved in that. And queer was a very political movement and I was always politically engaged.
A big part of being queer involved performance, and an underground party scene emerged. This blend of politics and self-expression created a safe space for people to explore their sexuality.
It began simply with, oh, we can't see this kind of performance and nobody's going to give me a gig, well, I'll put on my own party. It was absolutely political. These parties were fundraisers, whether you were giving to Bobby Goldsmith or Positive Women, and they became very quickly incubators of a particular type of performance. And at that time, what was really the new revolution was the presence of women, of queer women. We had not been that present previously. That was the ethos, and that would have been behind Tobin Saunders' ethos as well.
My name is Tobin Saunders, and I also have an alter ego by the name of Vanessa Wagner.
Well, hello, my gorgeous punters. Here I am at Oxford Street in Sydney.
I think Vanessa Wagner was a joke on gender, it was a joke on drag. I was realising at the time that activism required some spark and colour. I wanted to change people's opinions around women. I wanted people to change their opinions and politics around how one would perform gender. I wanted to change people's minds about the way drag was performed and to remove things like racism and misogyny in that milieu, which was quite common, and also to be an out HIV positive person of some celebrity, I guess, at that time, and use that as an example, a public peer, really. We weren't reinventing the wheel, but we certainly were reinventing socialising at a time when it was dark, it was responding to HIV and AIDS.
What do we want? Gay rights! What do we want?
The Mardi Gras, we have to remember, was actually a street party. And the performativity of it was really there from the beginning. And the performativity of the politics is the constant. Sure, the 90s was a golden age in a sense, but it hasn't stopped. We have maintained this culture and it's ongoing.
The gay liberation story has evolved to encompass disparate and divergent sexualities. But what hasn't changed is the need for safe spaces. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer and intersex people can build and maintain a sense of community.
The Red Rattler is a venue in Sydenham and it's run by a co-op and it fosters a lot of alternative queer events, from performance nights through to discussion nights through to dance parties.
When I was about 12, I remember texting my friend who I knew was bi, and I remember sort of going like, I think I like girls. I was scouring the internet and just like was searching and searching and searching and searching, and up popped 2010.
These LGBTQI young people are celebrating who they are because of the work of 2010, one of several organisations for young people with diverse sexuality and gender.
Hello, you've called 2010. This is Danielle speaking.
Remarkably, 2010 incorporates the organisation started by two men who shared that first gay kiss on Australian television. But there's still a lot to do.
We've been together 50 years,
Every day of those 50 years, we've been discriminated against on many, many different levels. And of course, the other issue is marriage equality. I think that is probably the most important thing, to have the same rights as a so-called straight couple have.